Each and every year in North American motorsports, there are drivers from coast to coast starting out in the opening rungs of motorsports, whether you're talking about late model stock car racing, drag racing, or open wheel road racing. These young drivers plying their trade, learning the craft, focusing on potentially one day getting to the bid leagues, whether it's the NTT IndyCar Series, NASCAR, or the NHRA. On this particular evening, we're going to see a bunch of drivers who are working their way up through the ranks, running in the FRP, the Formula Race Promotions Program, one of the top open wheel Formula Series in North America. They run the F1600 Championship Series, the F2000 Championship Series, and the Formula Atlantic Championship Series as well. Of course, in the midst of our COVID-19 coronavirus shutdown, everyone looking to the iRacing service to get a chance to get back behind the wheel. And that's what we'll see here this evening. A lot of great drivers set to go here at Road Atlanta here in Brazelton, Georgia. Should be an interesting evening. The second season of the program, already having one season in the books. My name's Rob Howden, folks, joined today by Brian Delp. Great to be here, as we said, at Road Atlanta. Tremendous racetrack, 2.52 miles in length, 12 turns, and most assuredly one of the iconic racetracks in North American motorsports. Drivers on the racetrack right now. We'll jump quickly into the action here as qualifying is underway, a 20-minute qualifying session for you. We're likely to have about 35 drivers or more set to qualify for today's race. A couple of events, a doubleheader for you here. Before we jump in, let's have a look at the weather here as well. As the weather comes up, I'm going to bring Brian Delp in. Brian, great to have you with us here on Apex Racing TV. This is your first iRacing broadcast. Couldn't have picked a better one. This is going to be a lot of fun. F1600, F2000, Atlantic drivers all set to go here driving the Skip Barber race car.
It's always exciting to be here, and these Skip Barbers are a lot of fun to watch, especially as we see the track is 86 degrees. These things will be sliding around, as we know that they will. A lot of the keys to this race is going to be keeping it on the track and not pushing it too far and keeping the car under control as these things slide around. But with these cars, a lot of times sliding is the way to go fast.
Well, indeed, especially you're going to get some of the drivers who run in the F1600 Championship Series here with FRP. They're used to sliding the cars around. Again, the difference between, let's say, a US F2000 car or an Indy Pro 2000 car on the road to Indy is the fact that the cars that the drivers compete with in F1600, no wings. Just the slick tires, Hoosier tires, that's it. No front wing, no rear wing. Hardly any downforce at all. So the drivers have to throw the car around. You kind of slide by the apex. It's all about car control, and that's why F1600 racing continues to be the premier place for these young drivers to learn the craft. You learn how to slide a car around, and that's what gets you quick. I'm looking forward to seeing how the drivers start to put some lap times down here. But again, Brian, you mentioned a bit the weather. 85 degrees track temperature. I think they said 77-degree ambient temperature, so not too bad for Georgia. As always, down in Brazelton, the humidity a little bit higher. One of the concerns, a little bit of crosswind as well. 12-mile-an-hour wind today here in Brazelton, so that could play a bit of a factor depending on the way the wind is actually blowing. Could be in their face coming into the braking zone down into turn number 10. We'll see whether that plays a role, but qualifying getting underway, as we said. Justin Hill with the quick lap out of the gate, a 136.663. Back behind him, Series 1 champion Max Esterton. He won 3 races in that first 6-race series, 3 doubleheaders. He currently sits in the second spot. Canadian Matt Clark, who will run this year for Brian Graham Racing. Rather, he'll be running for, I believe, Britain West Motorsports, second-year driver in F1600 up in Ontario. He currently sits in the 3rd spot. Reese Everard jumps down to the P1 spot, 136.654. They had some practice, Brian, before coming into this qualifying session. All the drivers kind of pressing that mental reset button. They had some errors, maybe had some struggles. Take a little break, get back at it, and see if they can't fix those moving into qualifying.
Yeah, we saw during the practice session a lot of these guys maybe pushing a little bit too far, trying to find that edge where that they can keep the car on the track and still go fast without losing any speed. And so we saw a lot of wrecks happening in practice. So they're trying to push that out of their mind and lay down these fast laps so that they can start as high as they can. Now, the biggest thing to remember is that this is only qualifying for the first race, as we have 2 races this evening. The second race is set by the fastest lap in the first race, and that's something that's a little bit different, as normally it would be by your finishing position or things like that. So once we get into the first race, you're going to see a lot of these drivers try to lay down a fast lap while keeping clean and trying to win that race. So it's something that's a little bit different and unique to this series.
I like it a lot because I think it does play a bit of the strategy. You can't just sit behind someone and kind of cruise for a little bit and wait for that last pass. You have to make sure sometime during the race, and normally later in the race, obviously the fuel load starts going down. We're not doing any pit stops, but the fuel load will go down. The cars are going to get quicker near the end of the run. You got to make sure you lay that one flyer down to set yourself up nicely for race number 2. Great shot of the drivers coming through turn number 1, a very fast part of the racetrack here. As I had said earlier, 12 corners. We'll ride along here a little bit with Max Esterton. Maybe we can go on board with Max, of course, a reigning series champion. That would be a good shot. Here he is coming down through what they call the S's. Right along with him a little bit here, over to turn number 5, that fast left-hander at the end of the S's here.
Yeah, and as you see right there, the back end kicks around on these cars, causing it to just slide around. They're kind of like a dirt track car would do, except here we are on asphalt out on the road, and so it's very fun to watch these cars race and to be in them yourself, and it's just such an amazing thing to see.
Yeah, it really is a controlled slide. It's not just the rear, right? A lot of times the whole car will be sliding all the way past the apex. And of course, a different tire model here as well. We're not talking about the full slick tires. You can see out the front of Max's car here, the treaded tires that are run as part of the Skip Barber car. Again, one of the premier primary kind of grassroots opening level platforms that people run when you come into iRacing. A lot of people still love to drive it. And of course, the basis for the program here for Formula Race Promotions. Here's this long run, a downhill braking zone into turn number 10. Max off it a little bit, but good shot of the driver in front of him, kind of throwing it through. And Brian, just watching this opening lap, I think we're going to see it. These drivers are on the razor's edge, and they got to work the curbing. These guys are all up over the curbing, even coming through the final corner, a little touch there as well. You got to use all of the racetrack, but no more. That's when we see the issues. Drivers getting hung out to dry, they drop a rear wheel, outside wheel. That's when you find yourself in trouble.
I think another big thing is going to be give and take, especially here, as you saw that heavy braking zone. It's going to come down to some give and take there, because if someone tries to outbrake another person, especially the way these cars slide around, it's so easy to push off and into someone. And if you do that, there's a good chance that you're both going to end up wrecked. So it's going to be very interesting to see how these drivers are able to control themselves enough to give and take throughout the race and give that respect to one another.
Yeah, indeed, Brian. The two primary passing points of this racetrack, of course, the end of the run between turn 5 and turn 6. You come out of the S's. This is the corner. No, this is actually the back straightaway, I believe. But as they work their way all the way down into this corner here, this is actually turn number 6, picking up the visual of it. That particular corner, you want to make the pass here. You can dive to the inside. But as you come out of that corner, you've got to get on the throttle cleanly out of 7, because that's that big run all the way down the straightaway to turn number 10. If you give it up with maybe an over-aggressive pass in turn number 6 and check up and lose the draft or lose the run, you just can't get out of turn number 7 well enough, and then that's that big run down to 10, as I said. You find yourself losing the guys in front of you, so you really have to be strategic in making passes here. It's all about exit speed in so many of these corners to be able to make that pass down into the next corner, next turn, the 10A, 10B combination through here, and then the very tough uphill through 11, through the blind turn number 12. You have to trust car placement because the car gets super light coming back down over the hill. You're trying to hit the exit point. See a lot of incidents there as well. Drivers losing control coming under the bridge.
And we just saw Max Esterson jump all the way up to the number 1 spot, laying down a 1:35.75 here. That is the first driver to hit the 1:35 mark, and I'm sure as this qualifying session goes on, more may join him. But that is a very fast time when you look at some of the times that others have laid down.
Yeah, Max, an impressive driver, of course, does a lot of sim racing, has done it for many, many years, does some coaching as well. So we expect Max to, again, be kind of the guy to watch here this weekend. And he'll be, what I like is he'll kind of be that bar that all the other drivers will, to a certain extent, measure themselves against. They're guys who have just come into the sport. You know, before we came on the broadcast, Brian, you mentioned about the fact that looking at the different I ratings of the different drivers throughout here, some guys, have come on iRacing just in the last maybe 6 weeks or so, since we had to shut things down once the coronavirus kind of hit as hard as it did. Other drivers have been part of iRacing for 3, 4, 5 or more years. So the I rating's a lot higher. The experience on this program is a lot more as well. And I think it's such a unique discipline. Experience on the outdoor track, experience on iRacing, the same thing. The longer you've been doing it, the better you are.
Yes, and as we talked about those I ratings, the split is huge in this field. The highest is Max Esterson with a 7,957 I rating, and then the lowest is Chris Kierce with a 462 I rating. Now, I rating does not mean everything, but that just shows the wide spectrum of drivers that we have in this field. And that's going to be another interesting part to play into this because you do have those guys with more experience that they're going to be around some of these guys that are new, and it's going to be interesting to see how those two different areas play together.
Good little group of drivers here working their way through turns 10A and B up through 11 over to turn number 12, led by the number 6 of Simon Sykes, one of the drivers for Rice Race Prep, which is one of the primary prep shops. Greg Rice runs a number of drivers in the F1600 Championship Series. He's had drivers in the F2000 Championship Series as well, veteran team owner and driver himself. Let's have a quick look at the qualifying run as they run on track at this point here. We're looking at around 6 minutes remaining in this 20-minute qualifying session. Max Esterson, as we said, out front now, just over 0.3 of a second over Zach Rivard. Connor Klubine, a third-generation driver out of Ontario. His father, David Klubine, running Britain West Motorsports up in Brantford, Ontario. He currently sits in the 4th spot. Dylan Christie running in 5th. Simon Sykes in 6th position. Kyle August in 7th. Matt Clark in 8th. Justin Hill in 9th, and Colin Mullen rounding out the top 10. And one thing, Brian, I'll bring up, it's interesting. A lot of drivers here, of course, in this F1600 Championship Series that we'll see run throughout the season. Long-time top F1600 Series in the U.S. A lot of drivers coming from Ontario as well. The Ontario Toyo Tires Championship, which I think is cool. They've come down to run against it. So it's almost like kind of an all-star match. You know, that's the US F1600 drivers versus the Canadian F1600 drivers. I like the fact that they're getting a chance to run virtually here on iRacing.
Yes, we have a huge mix here, which normally in a lot of series you see people from one area or one country, but with the mix between Canadian drivers and American drivers, it does give it a little bit dynamic. So would you then say that some of the US drivers are going to give them a little bit more slack than the Canadian drivers are going to give each other? And so that's another aspect that could play into this, is that nationality aspect, to kind of see what's going to happen.
So, you know what? What I've kind of learned from most drivers is when you pull the helmet on and pull the visors on, I don't think anybody really cares what flag's on the side of the car. I think they're going to drive each other as hard as they would drive any other driver. And we're going to see that, I think, here, of course, in the Skip Barber car, because the draft will come into play. We're going to see the big packs of drivers. You got to throw this car around, as we're seeing. Every shot we see from some of these corners, these guys are just throwing it in there, getting it kind of drifting sideways and getting back on power. You got to keep the revs up. You got to keep it up high in the rev limit in that window to be able to make sure you're coming out of the corner with good forward bite. Now, I think the drivers don't care which country they're from. I think they're just going to race hard. That said, Connor Klubine has worked his way up to P2 now, just about just under 0.3 of a second behind Esterson. 4 minutes to go in qualifying. Esterson, Klubine, Everard, Rivard, and Hill, the Fast Five.
Yeah, and we still, Esterson is still the only one in that 135 mark. We haven't seen anyone break into the 135s other than him yet. So it's going to be interesting to see if anyone else within this time can break into there, because we have about 3.5 minutes left in qualifying. So they're running out of time to lay down that fast lap.
You know, Brian, let's take this opportunity before we go racing. Of course, we'll be jumping right into the play-by-play. Let's have a look at the championship from the opening round. Max Esterson was able to get that title win, finishing about 39 points ahead of Colin Mullen. He was second place in the championship. Dylan Christie ended up third in that initial that championship battle. Actually scored a win in the opening round at Lime Rock. Dan Clark was fourth in the points, running for Brad Hayes Racing, and for Citation Engineering, Miles Crabb was the driver who capped off the Fast Five. We did have 4 different winners. Now, granted, Max Esterson swept Laguna Seca, won the second race of the doubleheader at Lime Rock, but Dylan Christie was able to get the win in the opening round, and Scott Andrews and Dan Clark splitting the victories at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park up north of Toronto.
Yeah, it's going to be, we've seen a lot of different winners, and so it could really come down to anyone at any moment, because a lot of times as these drivers get late in races, they start pushing these cars harder and harder and start to lose that edge of being able to control the car. And so then they end up causing in wrecks and putting each other in trouble. So honestly, you never know who's going to end up winning one of these things, because you just could be in the right place at the right time as two of your competitors take each other out.
Indeed the case. A lot of luck in terms of where to be, car placement, being patient, I think, when you see drivers in front of you that may be running a little bit harder. But you mentioned it, Brian, as well, right at the top of qualifying before we got into it, was the fact that race number 2 will be set. The grid will be set by your fastest lap in race number 1. So as the car starts getting lighter near the end of the session, you may see some of these drivers, even if they're running 5th or 6th, they may try to lay one down, really run the ragged edge if they think they have to have a fast lap. That's something that's going to happen. I would expect we'll see fast laps coming in the last maybe 3, 4, 5 laps when the cars get light, and that's when these drivers will be pushing as hard as they possibly can near the end of the event. So it'll be interesting for sure. I think it'll make things exciting for the final 3, 4, 5 laps. Of course, they'll be battling for the race win, but they'll also be battling for a quick lap.
The other thing that when it comes down towards the end, there's a lot of times you see these cars packed up, something you would see at like Talladega or Daytona in the stock cars. And it's interesting to see how these cars drive so well together in a pack that, again, anything can happen at any moment at that point. So when you get into those packs, you just have to be very alert of where you're putting your car and where your competitors are putting theirs so that nothing happens in those final last laps.
Yeah, indeed. Final minute of qualifying right now. Max Esterson leading the way at 135.745. Connor Klubine's been able to get down. No, actually not quite. Klubine not quite able to get yet into the 35s. I love it. That's how close it is right now. Let's bring this up with the last 40 seconds coming, though. We'll find out where we end up. But these cars have had a long history in developing young drivers coming up the ranks. The Skip Barber National Championship Series was the hot spot for drivers coming out of karting for many, many years. You look at the graduates out of that program, the alumni, Joseph Newgarden, Connor De Felipe, Gabby Chavez, so many young drivers coming up through the ranks in that particular series. The racing we saw back in the day when they had the big Hanford strip on the back of the wing, it was drafts all day long. You would get, like at Road America, you'd get passed coming up the hill. You'd pass the guy back and he would pass you again by the end of the straightaway. That's what the draft was like there. Final seconds of qualifying for the first round of the second season of FRP and the iRacing Challenge. We're racing here at Road Atlanta. It'll be a doubleheader here on Apex Racing TV. Again, my name's Rob Howden, joined by Brian Delp. Dennis Branch running the cameras, producing the broadcast here today. We have set things up and we are good to go. Man, that surprising me here. Justin Hill, that must have been the final lap for Justin Hill, 135.503. We've been talking about Max Esterson turning the fastest lap time, but indeed, Justin Hill steals it away from him. Esterson will start on the outside of row number 1, the champion from the previous series. Dylan Christie alongside the highest qualifying Canadian Connor Klubine on the outside of row number 2. Row 3 will be Reese Everard and Kyle August. Row 4, Zach Rivard and Colin Mullen. On row number 5, Simon Sykes on the inside. Jean-Christophe Trahan on the outside, row number 5. Matt Clark and Dan Clark will be on row number 6. Further in the field, row 7, Zach Vanier, one of the Canadian drivers running for Britain West Motorsports, alongside Jackson Lee, top driver from last year's Lucas Oil School of Racing Formula Car Series. Christopher Wright and Ryan Bjerke will be on row number 8. William Liston and Megan Gilks on row 9. Gilks, a veteran of the W Series last year. Chris Kearse and Joey Selmans on row number 10, while Dexter Zuba and Brandon Newey will occupy row number 11. 23rd and 24th, Andrew Dobby and Jason Pettit. Further back in the field, Tim Wilkin and Bob Perona on row 13. Charles Ante, the veteran driver, starting 27th alongside Omar Khan. It'll be Phil Kingham and Ayrton Hook on row number 15. Dave D'Addario and Joe Calasacco rounding out the 32 drivers we have set to go. So, Brian, there's your grid. 16 rows strong, 32 drivers set to go as we get ready to start the second season of the FRP iRacing Challenge.
Yes, it's going to be very exciting. I can't wait to see what happens on lap 1. These guys are going to be pushing it as hard as they can to not get into each other, along with trying to make up as many positions as they can on these restarts. So it's going to be a lot of exciting action, and I can't wait to see what happens.
Opening lap, always a crazy one. As we all know, every driver knows that they know the line. You can't win the race in the opening corner, but you can sure lose it. And that's, I'm sure they'll all have that in their mind, but any driver, myself included, you realize when you put the helmet on and knock that visor down, the opening lap is such a great opportunity to make up a lot of positions, not just 1 or 2 as well. You get a good jump, you're able to get the car positioned in the right place. You could find yourself moving 3, 4, 5 or more positions up the order, especially this particular racetrack. Because think about this layout, Brian. You come, of course, down the hill, you get the green. You go through turn number 1, and then you're immediately into the 2, 3, 4 section. Just the snaking S's that they're going through right now, all the way down the hill. If you missed the car placement in one of the first corners, you're always catching up, trying to get yourself back down to turn number 5. That's the place I'm going to hold my breath when they go through the S's for the first time, because I think it'll be pretty crazy.
Yeah, especially if they end up in the S's side by side. You never know what could happen. The thing I will be interested to see is if the front 3 can pull away from the rest of the pack, as they were the only 3 to make it into the 135s. So it'll be very interesting to see if they're able to pull away or if the others can keep up with them as they're racing hard.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point. We have seen some separation speed-wise in qualifying. The draft is going to allow a lot of these guys that maybe don't have that pace to stay with them, but you got to be key, or you got to be perfect, let's say that way, in the draft. You can't make a mistake. If you do, these guys are going to be able to pull away. As you said, 3 drivers able to get into the 135s. We'll see how things shake down. Nerves, of course, starting to develop in these young drivers a little bit here. So many of them will be taking the seats of their actual real-life race cars, hopefully here in just a month's time. I know that the FRP looking to get back rolling very soon. Good news out of Ontario up here in Canada as well, that auto racing, car and motorcycle racing, part of the first stage of opening up. So hopefully we'll see them get back on track up at Canadian Motorsports Park pretty soon. We know a lot of drivers, of course, spend some time here, though, on iRacing. Drivers working their way down that back straightaway into turn number 10 and 11. They'll stack them up once again. Justin Hill on the inside, final lap, giving him the pole position. Max Esterson will start on the outside, 3 times a winner in season number 1 at the FRP iRacing Challenge. Down the hill, looking for that pace car to duck on off. Indeed, it did. We'll put it in the hands of Justin Hill. He will lead him out of turn number 12 here at Road Atlanta. Spooling it up. Getting started with round number 1. Green, green, green. Racing down into turn number 1. 2 wide so far. Will they get through cleanly? Everybody on the brakes. Car starting to slide a bit. They'll work their way back up the hill. Brian, first time into the S's.
Yes, and they are side by side all the way back towards the end of the row. It actually looked like there was some contact on the restart from Hill and Esterson. A little bit of tire touching as we see a car off in the grass, and cars are going around everywhere.
That's what I expected. One driver got a little bit loose. Simon Sykes might have been involved in that. Kyle August potentially as well. 2-driver breakaway up front. Those leaders able to get away from it. One driver actually went off to driver left. Another driver coming through got sideways coming into, I want to say, probably turn number 3. Trying to get out of 3 and got sideways a little bit. 2 other drivers with absolutely nowhere to go. Everyone else slotting in, though. Pretty good run down here into turn number 6 and 7. So, Brian, a little bit of chaos mid-pack, but for the most part, drivers looking pretty clean coming through turn 6 and 7. First time down the back straightaway.
Yeah, it looks like we've now singled filed out a little bit, but we do have a 2-car breakaway a little bit on the front. We'll see if Hill and Esterson can pull away a little bit more from Christie, or if Christie uses that draft to catch back up, as these 2 are now side by side at the lead.
Yeah, I can't say I'm not overly surprised to see Esterson and Hill pull away as they have, because we saw the pace they were able to put down in both practice and qualifying. They got a nice little advantage right now over Dylan Christie. About 1.2 seconds will complete the opening lap. This race scheduled for 15 laps or 40 minutes of time distance. So if we do have some issues, full Courcella, whatever it may be, the max time will be 40 minutes. But otherwise, we're going to try to run 15 laps for the opening run of the doubleheader. Watching the number 74 of Dan Clark now. Going to work to the inside of Kyle August. Side by side through turn number 1. Connor Klubine, not that far back. Clark able to make the pass done. Driver off, though. One driver off on the outside of the racetrack there. Again, that might have been Connor Klubine in the 65. Brian, you mentioned driving on the razor's edge. You just simply can't overcook turn 1 because you lose so much momentum coming through the S's.
Yeah, as we see with a lot of these cars when they're coming off these turns, they push it just a little bit too far and they get that left side out into the grass. And normally it's okay, they can bring it back on, but sometimes if you push it just a little bit more than that, you really have to slow down as you put the entire car over into the grass.
Waiting for the drivers to settle in here once again. Early on, you always see it be a little bit hectic. Following now Klubine in that number 65 machine. Again, as I said, 3rd generation Ontario driver. The Klubine family have been around Ontario Formula Racing for, man, I got to say 50, it has to be 50 years. Again, Connor, the grandson of one of the icons of Ontario road racing, Oliver Klubine. Son David Klubine still runs Britain West Motorsports, one of the primary shops up in Canada. So following Connor going to work here in that number 65. Good little battle here. He's got, I believe, Reese Everard right behind him. Actually, Matt Clark has been able to get by. Matt Clark, sorry, Brian. Matt Clark's the driver up into 5th. Klubine 6th, Everard 7th.
And as we saw there into that heavy braking zone, a lot of cars making passes there, just coming to the inside and just outbraking their opponent drivers there. It's very easy to make a pass there as long as you can actually keep the car under your control under braking.
Indeed, that's the case. Aggressive braking, you don't have the car where it needs to be in terms of straight line, you're going to find yourself in trouble. Yeah, you can trail brake, but the initial hit on that brake pedal, you've got to be straight. You've got to have the car balanced. Good run so far for Justin Hill, trying to get this second season of FRP iRacing Challenge competition off to a good start. Max Esterson ran rounds 2, 3, and 4 of the opening schedule. Currently runs second right now, affiliated with Team Pelfrey in the number 80 machine. Dylan Christie still third. Dan Clark in 4th. Less than a second behind Dan Clark is Matt Clark as well. Looking for Matt Clark to move his way up here in the number 64. He'll run for Britain West Motorsports this year. But the leaders, as you said, Brian, able to get away nicely right now. About a 2-second advantage for Justin Hill and Max Esterson. Esterson, though, playing the game. He knows that if he drops back a little bit, you get that big rush up the straightaway to potentially get that fast lap. He'll look to the inside. Here comes Esterson. Piece of the lead down to the inside. Book it. He's through. Esterson to the lead, going by Justin Hill in turn number 10.
Yeah, we see Esterson and Hill continue to just swap the lead, but as they do that, Christie a lot of times will get a little bit of a run from behind. Here they actually start to pull away from him as they've built a 2.7 second lead off of Christie and then a 5-second lead to Clark. So the front two have pulled away, using each other to kind of draft with one another to pull away from them, which is another aspect that's interesting in itself.
What I like right now is the fact that Justin Hill is tucking right back in behind him, not letting Esterson get away at all. That means we're going to have these two drivers potentially battling for the entire 15 laps. Same goes for Dan Clark and Matt Clark. Those two drivers locked together further back. You see them coming down through the S's. Dylan Christie, the lone car there by himself in P3. We'll pick up Matt Clark in the 64. He's trying to go to work now here on Dan Clark. They are all over each other. Again, I've watched Matt Clark work his way up through the ranks in karting, whether it be the SuperKarts USA Winter Series, running some of the Rock Cup races as well. A great young Canadian karter who transitioned into open wheel racing up in the Ontario F1600 series. He'll run this year with Britain West Motorsports. So having a good run here so far. Dan Clark battling with him. Another battle further back, 3 drivers, Reese Everhard, Simon Sykes, and Connor Klubine, Brian, separated by about a half a second.
Yeah, and as we see them in a line right there, they continue to just get a draft on one another and keep changing positions. As you see them tuck out there, possibly going 3 wide, and they are as they're going down the straight there, going into this very hard braking zone, so there will have to be some give, and we see that one car does back out there.
Well, hold your breath, because Simon Sykes went by first, and then I want to say that Connor Klubine went by them both. So Klubine went from 3rd in that group to P1. They were 3 wide coming down the straightaway. Sykes was able to get by Reese Everard for the position, but then Klubine got a good run and actually drove by both of them. At the same time, Matt Clark made a move to the inside at turn number 10. He was able to take away P4 from Dan Clark as well. Oh, contact! That's Klubine off. Contact in turn number 1. It came to a head here on the beginning of lap number 5. Klubine on the outside. Hopefully we'll get a chance to get a replay on that. Kyle August was part of that battle as well. You know, Brian, they were just racing so hard. 3 wide down the back straight early in a 15-lap race. And, of course, contact over there in turn number 1. Tough one for Connor Klubine. He's had an up-and-down run so far.
Yeah, we knew it was coming. They were looking 3 wide, almost 4 wide at one point. You just saw this coming to a head at some point as long as there was no give. And these drivers wanted it all going into the here. As you see, just a little bit of contact. They both get sideways. 3 of the cars make it through, but Klubine just couldn't make it.
The only guy able to get through cleanly was the guy at the very front there, and that was Simon Sykes. The other 3 drivers had contact. Kyle August, Reese Everhard, and Connor Klubine all having incidents there. Contact coming through 1. The two first were able to continue. The latter, Connor Klubine, falling all the way down into the 19th position. Here's your battle for the lead, though. Let's key back on the spotlight up front as Esterson's gone back to P1. Justin Hill, though, sliding there into second. And having been passed a couple of laps ago, he's kind of settled in here now. And that's, for me, kind of a sign of poise and maturity when you realize that, you know what, you don't need to be battling all race long. You've already developed a 3.5-second lead over the guys behind you. It's a mano-a-mano race. This is two drivers battling it out for the race win. At this point, Justin Hill, he can fall back a little bit, use the draft to pull up to try to get that fast lap. Because remember, that's something we have to look for before this is all said and done. What's the best lap going to be? So far, a 136.23 for Esterson, 136.41 for Justin Hill. Fast laps we've seen out of the entire field so far. These drivers running 1 and 2.
Yeah, and another strategy, Hill could be there saving tires behind Esterson. So when we get to the final end of this race, Hill will have better tires and able to actually just drive up past Esterson and be able to run harder into these turns because, you know, as the tires fall off, there's not as much grip on the tires in iRacing. So the fact that he could be just sitting back there biding his time and waiting, that's a very smart strategy from Hill.
I will admit that I don't know a ton about the tire model, the tire modeling in terms of wear here in the Skip Barber program. Knowing it's a Skip Barber car and the way they approach the car in the first place, I don't think you're going to see a lot of tire fall off. But we can ask one of our drivers, get a feel on that, because right now Justin Hill has pulled out and just drove right by Max Esterson on the back straightaway. Here's that battle between the Clarks again. It's Matt Clark and Dan Clark. Just a little difference there in the spelling of the last name. Add the E for Dan. Dan Clark running 5th. Matt Clark, though, Mackenzie Clark out of Canada, still P4. Good battle here for the 4th position. They've been able to pull about 3 seconds on Simon Sykes, who's been able to get away from Kyle August and Reese Everard. A little further back, another good scrap between Dexter Zuba and Megan Gilks. That is the battle for 11th position right now. Here it is here on screen. Zuba running up front. Gilks running right behind, 11th and 12th. Gilks just tucked in behind the gearbox. Again, not pushing too hard, trying to work her way up into the top 10. Again, Megan Gilks, one of the young ladies that raced in the W Series last year. Came up through the F1200 Formula V category with Vallis Motorsports in Canada. Did some F1600 racing, and great to see her as well running here in this FRP iRacing Challenge.
It's very interesting to see how big of a gap there actually is throughout the track. The past couple races, we've seen clumps of cars just in giant packs with one another of anywhere between 5 to 10 cars. So to see this gap really shows the amount of work that's been put in this week. And it's just very interesting to see the differences between the past couple races and this one.
Indeed. I wonder sometimes if it's the racetrack, you know, Brian, because there's some tracks, because you're running on the ragged edge, as you said, we saw a lot of drivers go off during the practice session right before we went into qualifying. I just think this racetrack asks so much about the drivers in terms of being able to carry a lot of speed through 6 and 7. Of course, coming down through turn 11 over to turn number 12. It's a tough racetrack. Here's a pass for 7th position. Reese Everard, the 61, able to get to the inside of Kyle August. Those two drivers were in the battle early on that included Connor Klubine and Simon Sykes. Sykes has been able to clear. He goes to P6. Back a little further up front, Dan Clark has gone back by Mackenzie Clark, so that fight continues. Coming up through turn number 1. They'll get back to the S's here again. Dan Clark leading the way now. Clark in that number 74. Matt Clark in the 64. Again, car placement crucial coming down through the S's. You can see Matt Clark climbing up all over top of the curbing of turn number 2. Again, working their way, snaking their way down down the hill. This beautiful racetrack here at Road Atlanta. Such a picturesque track in Brazelton, Georgia. One of the iconic facilities in North American motorsports. Of course, every year, Petit Le Mans in October packs them in. Most recently, the recent years, they have absolutely jam-packed the racetrack. Let's cross our fingers, Brian. We'll be able to get back down to Road Atlanta for Petit this year because the IMSA drivers always put on such a tremendous show.
Yes, it's exciting that racing is going to be back this week, and I'm sure that everywhere across almost every nation, it's going to be excitement to see racing back. Whether it's stock cars, whether it's Indy, whether it's anything, it's going to be very exciting to just see actual cars out on a track.
Yeah, we're of course enjoying ourselves here, announcing on Apex Racing TV. Again, my name's Rob Howden, joined by Brian Delp, his first time in the commentary booth, doing a tremendous job for us here as we've got still a ways to go. Probably about 7 minutes remaining, 27 minutes remaining, but only 6 laps remaining in this race. Brian, we've been watching a lot of iRacing on TV. It's been amazing with, of course, IndyCar and NASCAR on Fox and IndyCar on the NBC network as well. We've been watching a lot of iRacing. I think you're probably in the same boat as me and everybody else. Can't wait to watch the Cup race and the events from Darlington this weekend. I can't wait to see IndyCar. Even though there's no fans, I can't wait to see the one-day race at Texas on June the 6th. Just show me some real racing on TV. I'll take it. I can't wait to get back to the track myself, but just to see some real cars on track would just be absolute heaven right now.
Yes, it's going to be completely exciting for any motorsports fan. And the big thing, though, is that we did get some exposure for iRacing during this time, and hopefully that continues as a lot of these drivers are now on the service and now can be doing this with fans and things like that. So it's going to be a very exciting time for motorsports in whole, whether it's iRacing, whether it's real life. It's just right now, being a motorsports fan is a great time.
Yeah, and I think kudos to everyone, of course, at iRacing, because the partnership between NASCAR and iRacing and NBC, you've obviously read the articles and heard the stories. No contracts in place, just essentially everybody working together to try to keep racing going, keep the fans excited about it. It's been amazing, and I think you would agree, iRacing is going to still skyrocket after this. So many of the racers I've talked to, whether it's IndyCar guys I know, NASCAR guys I've known, they want to keep doing this. They want to do it in the off season. They'd like to be able to have some more of the races. Is it going to be some of the super serious stuff that we had? Maybe not. Maybe we might see a bunch of races for charity. I know that we've seen a bunch of the different drivers kind of jump into the ranks of doing some more fan-friendly stuff in terms of potentially, James Hinchcliffe, Connor Daly, some of those guys doing some charity work as well. I think we're going to see a lot of great racing there on the service. Racing we're seeing right now, though, is pretty solid, man. We got some good battling back and forth. This is Dan Clark and Matt Clark. They're trying to work their way through some slower traffic, and they got a little hectic down there in turn number 10. Brian, almost a couple of drivers getting together.
Yeah, they are actually starting to catch Dylan Christie, but I'm not sure they're going to have enough laps to get there. They've got it within 2 seconds, but I still don't think within the next 5 laps they're going to be able to get there. I'm sure they can see him, and it's frustrating that they can see him down these straightaways and just can't get there.
Yeah, indeed. Last lap time by for Dan Clark, a 136.86. Christie, 136.7. They got balked up a little bit, as I said, coming through turn number 10 and 11. That allowed Christie to maintain that little gap that he does have. About 4 seconds, as you see on the ticker there, 5.9 seconds back from the leader is Christie, 10.1 seconds back is Dan Clark. So they can see him up the road, and here comes Matt Clark. He's going to go back to the inside. Let's make it too wide again, down into turn number 10, will we? Indeed. Matt Clark has gone back to P4. An epic battle between he and Dan Clark here. And this is what I love seeing. And I've seen a lot more of it, Brian. I don't know how much you've been watching of the racing we've seen. So many people jumped on board with the iRacing program right as things kind of got shut down. Hey, I want to go racing. I've never done this before. Companies like Fanatec and Ricmotec, whatever it may be, shipping rigs left and right. I called up my friends at Wagner Race Products. I needed a new PC because mine was, 7 years old, and they hooked me up with a new PC. I've seen, though, over the last 6 weeks to 7 weeks now, some of the drivers that maybe were new, we saw a lot more wrecks. I think what we're seeing now is a lot better racecraft. Drivers more comfortable with what it's like driving on iRacing. You don't have that seat of the pants feel. It's more having to feel the wheel, if the wheel gets light, whatever it may be. This is what I see a lot more of. All the racing I'm covering for new drivers is these great one-on-one battles where drivers are really starting to take it more seriously. It's not so much simulation in their mind, but they're really trying to use it as experience, an experiential thing. So they're not driving over their heads. They're driving with the same respect they would if they were out on the racetrack. And that's the kind of fights we're seeing right now between Hill and Masterson and between Dan Clark and Matt Clark.
Yeah, it's a completely different feel being on iRacing. You don't have quite the feeling of the car that you would in real life, where you'd be able to feel the car getting light or pushing too much. That's something you don't quite feel as we see them going too wide down into the heavy braking zone here. They're getting around and pulling out. Hill almost got back to the front there, but he decided to tuck in behind as we got 4 laps left, so we're coming down to that time where these two have just been exchanging the lead throughout the entire race.
I feel like they're playing with each other right now. To be honest, they're just going back and forth. We will say this: they have both turned the fastest laps thus far. I think they're the only drivers into the 135s. A 135.84 fast lap for Matt Esterson, 135.95 for Justin Hill. So that would be the front row in race number 2. Of course, race 2, the grid will come based on the lap times laid down here in race 1. This battle continuing. This is for 4th. This is Dan Clark and Matt Clark, and they continue to go back and forth. But hey, let's bring another player in here. We haven't talked about Simon Sykes yet. He was a bit quicker on that last lap, significantly quicker, 0.4 of a second. He's now only about, I want to say, a second and a half back. That light blue race prep machine. Simon Sykes is closing in the number 6, the American. He could make it a 3-driver battle here for the final 2 positions in the top 5. Only 3 laps to go, Brian. This could come down to maybe the final lap.
Yeah, and as we saw when we last checked in on this battle, they were actually catching Christie within 2 seconds. They are now 5 seconds behind. So between them two racing really hard and possibly catching some lap traffic, they have fallen very far back from where they were, falling right into the hands of Simon Sykes here as he's catching up to them. He's most likely going to get there by the end of this with the draft helping him, especially with these two too wide as they are right now. So if they continue to race like this, there's a good chance this will be a 3-car race for that top 5.
Yeah, not surprising looking at live timing here as well. A number of drivers are starting to post their fastest laps. As I said, the car's getting a little bit light on fuel. Dylan Christie, his fast lap, a 136.4. Reese Everard, his fast lap, a 137 flat. Same goes for Connor Klubine, 136.79. These drivers all starting to put their fastest laps down here. Just 2 laps remaining. The leaders have come across the line to complete lap number 13, or a working 13. I'm not quite sure. I'll have to get a confirmation on that from Dennis. I think we still may have a couple laps to go, but getting close to the end here, we are definitely seeing a fight brewing for that 4th, 5th, and 6th position, because Simon Sykes just laid his fastest lap down. He was 0.6 quicker than Dan Clark. He is most definitely coming less than a second back now.
Yeah, and if you notice, most of the fast laps are coming from the front runners here, but all the way down in the 14th position is Zachary Rivard with a 136.68, which would put him pretty much, I believe, on the 3rd or 2nd row. So he's running fast times back there. So it's going to be very interesting to see if he just continues to lay down those fast laps or if that's the highest he sits, but he could jump all the way up towards the front row.
You know, Brian, one of the beauties of that, and it's one of the great things about using the fast lap of the next race. Let's say you're involved potentially in an incident, race number 1, whatever it may be. You can find your entire weekend kind of ruined because, you didn't finish well in the race before, so you're going to start further back in race number 2. If you're able to get that one really good lap in the books, even if you had a bad race, even if you're like Zach back in the 14th spot, you put a good lap down, start somewhere in the top 3 rows, and that's essentially what he's been doing now. So he has a chance to potentially rebound in race number 2 and essentially save his championship. His 14th isn't going to get the job done early, but to be able to have that opportunity start further up, obviously better for him. Keying in on the battle right now for 12th, Zuba, Vanier, and Gilks going at it. That's Dexter Zuba in the number 61, or 81. The 66 is Zach Vanier, and the 49 of Megan Gilks going at it. Coming down the hill through turn number 12 now. Zuba holding off Vanier, but he'll look to the inside on the exit.
And it looks like they're going to be too wide going into the first turn up here. Now, these guys got to be careful. We're coming to the end of this race. You don't want to ruin your race by racing back for 12th. You want to try and get that best finish you can. The points are still important no matter where you are. So even back in 12th, you want to still try to finish the highest you can. If either of them wreck, they could easily fall back to 20th or worst.
Interesting. They're probably going to start very close together because the fast lap times for Zuba, Vanier, and Gilks all almost identical. A 37.51, 37.58, and 37.69. They're going to be together again somewhere mid-pack, probably mid to the front of the pack, the front mid, put it that way, for race number 2, because very similar lap times, hence why they're running together. Keying back on the fight for the race win. Esterson still leads here. Hill runs in second. I don't know that this is the last lap or we might see White this time by. I think this will be the final lap as they come back around. We should be able to see White flag, indeed. Yeah, final lap. I always have to get figured out how they're going to call it here. Lap 15, final lap on the racetrack. This is it here, Brian. They'll work their way through turn number 1. Who's going to make it happen here? Esterson with the lead. Justin Hill slotting into second.
Yeah, and Hill is right there on that bumper. He was all the way through turn 1. I thought he was actually might be able to get to his inside, but I think he's just going to wait his time and try and make a pass later on in the final lap.
Yeah, he's where you want to be, right? I know Esterson knows it too. He's not real happy, I don't think, about being P1 because the pass will happen down at the end of the straightaway. You don't do it here. Get cleanly through turn number 6 and 7 and see what you can do down into turn number 10. Expect to see Esterson move to the inside of the racetrack. That will be driver's left. It may have to be an outside run. Here they come through turn 6 and 7. This is the key run here for the drivers looking to go for the race win. Esterson, your leader. Out of turn number 7. It's the long crawl all the way down the back straightaway through the little kink, turn number 8. Turn 9's the second kink under the Mazda bridge. And look at this, tucked right in there, Brian. Side by side, coming down the straightaway. Here we go for the battle for the lead.
Yeah, and as we saw, Esterson was trying to protect that inside, but the run from Hill was just too much to protect there. So Hill jumps up to the lead, and we'll see what happens going in here. As Esterson jumps up ahead, they are side by side through that turn. We'll see. Hill should have the preferred line. It's going to be close.
Side by side down the hill, the outside line for Esterson. Can he hold it, or will Hill bring it home as the opening winner of series number 2? Indeed, he does. Justin Hill, victorious in race number 1 here at Road Atlanta. Here's the battle further back. This is for 4th, 5th, and 6th. It's going to be, I think, Matt Clark. Simon Sykes up on the curb. Matt Clark will take 4th. Simon Sykes able to get by Dan Clark for that 5th position. Didn't talk about Dylan Christie coming through cleanly all by himself. A really lonely race for Dylan Christie. Ran 3rd from the get-go. Justin Hill with the win. Just 0.07 of a second at the line. Here's another battle coming through. This is the battle between Vanier, Zuba, and Gilks. Vanier is going to get to the inside. He'll hold up. Gilks side by side. She drops a wheel. I think that, did Zuba get it? I'm not quite sure. That was 12th, 13th, and 14th. But Justin Hill with the win. Max Esterson in second. Your champion finishing P2 to start off this second season. Dylan Christie, as we said, a lonely run to 3rd. Final step on the podium. Matt Clark coming on top, out on top of the great battle. Race long with Dan Clark, Simon Sykes, after getting through the fight with Kyle August, Reese Everhard, and Connor Klubine, able to reel in that two-driver battle for 4th and 5th, able to slide by Dan Clark in the final circuit. So Matt Clark, top finishing Canadian, as the Americans sweep the podium. Hill, Esterson, and Christie. Clark, Sykes, and Clark, 4th, 5th, and 6th. 7th, Kyle August. 8th, Reese Everhard. 9th, Chris Wright. And 10th, an up and down day, but still a top 10 run for Connor Klubine. All in all, Brian, a pretty solid race. The opening event of this doubleheader.
Yeah, no, the amount of battles we had coming to the line was insane. The amount of drivers that were able to get inside, we saw a lot of tires hitting each other. The big thing for me there was Klubine still finishing 6th or 16th, I think. He had some issues, and being able to finish top 20, I think, is big for him, especially the amount of times he got shoved off track. But it's going to be interesting to see where these guys start coming up in the next race.
Well, we've got ourselves a 10-minute warm-up session right now. I think we'll kind of back out here a little bit. We'll give you a chance to watch the warm-up session. 10 minutes, and we'll get things dialed in. Look for us to come in a little bit, a couple minutes before we get set to go for round number 2. But, folks, stay with us here on the Apex Racing TV network. Round number 2 of the second series of the FRP iRacing Challenge up after this warm-up. Welcome back to live coverage of the second series, the second schedule of the FRP iRacing Challenge here on Apex Racing TV. My name is Rob Howden, joined by Brian Delp, Dennis Branch handling the production here today, and we look forward to getting things underway here. Round number 2 of what will be a 6-race program. We're here in Brazelton, Georgia at Road Atlanta, the iconic racetrack, coming off what was a fantastic battle between Justin Hill and Max Esterson in the opening round. They'll start as they did the opening, as Justin Hill able to get a good lap laid down. He won round number 1 and ends up starting on the pole alongside Esterson. Dylan Christie will end up in that third spot. Matt Clark, in the 4th position, kind of where they finished on track. Dan Clark will start 5th on the inside of road number 3 alongside Kyle August. Reese Everard and Chris Wright on row number 4, capping off the top 5. Connor Klubine on the outside in the 65. A good fast lap brings him back into the top 10 alongside William Liston. On row number 6, Zach Vanier, again, one of the other Canadian drivers in the number 66. He'll start alongside Dexter Zuba in the number 81. But we go back to row 7 and see Megan Gilks and Charles Ante. Row number 8 will be Andrew Dobby in the number 93 and the 42 of Ryan Bajurki, while Jason Pettit starts on the outside of Simon Sykes on row number 9. Row 10 to complete your top 20, Zach Rivard and Ayrton Hook. And on row number 11, Jackson Lee and Chris Kears. Rounding out the top 24, Colin Mullen starting deep in the field in the number 36. 23rd position for Colin. Watch for him to fight his way forward. Jean-Christophe Trahan starting in the 24th position. Tim Wilkin and Omar Khan will be on the same row, row 13. Row 14, Dave Daddario and Philip Kingham. It'll be Brandon Newey and Bob Perona on row number 15, and Joey Selmans and Joe Colasacco will round out the 32 drivers in the field. We'll hopefully see these drivers dial things in, get back going again. But I'll tell you, Brian, that opening race, pretty much what we expected. A couple of drivers kind of settling in, early chaos, but then a couple of drivers settling in. We had a great battle for the lead, awesome battle for 4th and 5th, end up being 4th, 5th, and 6th. Some good fights all the way through the field as well. I expect more of the same here, but what I really expect is drivers to potentially be a little smarter in turn number 1. We had the issues in 1 up into turn number 2. I look for a better start here. Will I get it? I'm not sure if it's good odds, but I'm hoping for a better start.
Yeah, I think the drivers are going to learn from the past mistakes and try to keep it pretty much clean this race. They've learned where they can push it, where they can't around other drivers, and they've kind of been racing around a lot of these guys now, actually on track in an actual race situation. An interesting thing to me, though, is we saw Simon Sykes up there racing for that 5th place position. He actually did not run that fast of a lap. He's back in 17th to start this race. So we could see him try to drive his way through the field. And as drivers do that, sometimes they can make mistakes that can lead them off the track.
I got to say, I was a bit surprised as well as we kind of worked our way down through the grid. Of course, with Justin Hill and Max Esterson on the front, I was waiting for Sykes to pop up. He was so good there. And especially with the fact that it was late in the run, he was kind of catching up to the drivers in front of him, Matt Clark and Dan Clark. I had to feel that he would have got a good lap in the draft. Obviously didn't quite put one full lap together. Maybe, a couple of segment laps. Wasn't able to run that theoretical best that you need to put a good lap time down. As you said, he's going to start all the way back there on row number 8. It'll be pretty intriguing to see how he works his way forward. Otherwise, drivers double filing up behind the pace car. They'll work their way again out of turn number 10 up to 11. Going to get at it once again. Justin Hill on the inside. Mac Esterson on the outside. Do we see a back-to-back win for Hill? It'll start right here. Out of the final corner. Green, green, green. Underway. Racing here at Road Atlanta. Once again, Hill, your leader into turn number 1.
Yeah, and we actually saw drivers off the track already. They're putting their left side tires out into that grass as they're making their way through turn 1. It seems like most of the drivers have made it through pretty cleanly, which is a very better start than the last time.
Well, there's a driver off. Heavy contact there. Another driver spinning up over top of the curb. All in all, a pretty decent stop. I think we expected even more chaos to a certain extent, but just a couple drivers getting together. One went off into the grass. Otherwise, everybody's settling in, because really, Brian, those drivers that had issues early, all they want to do, get through the opening corner. Get that run down to turn number 6. Get single file so you can go back to racing and make sure you have a full run and potentially a drive up into the top 15, top 10, even if you fall or start late in the race. Right now, though, 4-driver breakaway early. Hill, Masterson, Christie, and Clark.
Yeah, I think a lot of the drivers weren't cautious, but as we see, all the way back through towards the end of the lead lap cars here, there's mostly single file as we see he'll try to break the draft a little bit. And we see Esterson pulling to the inside, coming down into the braking zone. But I think definitely the cars have been a little bit more cautious just to try to make it through the opening lap.
Top four drivers working their way into the end of the straightaway. Matt Clark in the middle of a battle here as well, with Kyle August, Zachary Vanier, and Connor Klubine. Canadians up there now into the top 10. We've got, 4 Canadians and the 6 Americans. Good battle here. One thing, Brian, have a look at the tower, the ticker on the left side. Where is Simon Sykes? All the way back. My live timing is showing me 18th. I'll have to get that updated. He's not in the top 20 on the ticker we're looking at right now. Not a good start for Simon Sykes, who started back in that 16th position.
Yeah, he might have been one of those cars that had issues, or he might have just been really slow trying to get around those cars that were having issues. Another interesting thing is Hill is all the way back to 4th now, as we see Dan Clark and Dylan Christie getting ahead of him. He was not in this position at all last race, as the Esterson and Hill were able to pull away from the others. So it's going to be interesting to see if he sits back there or if he wants to get back around these guys to go after Esterson.
I think he'll be definitely going to work and kind of surveying the situation now. If you recall the opening lap, that first run down through the S's in race number 1, there was the incident that happened behind them, kind of stacked everybody up, and they were able to get away cleanly. And once they did that, they worked together and stretched away. We're seeing it now with a 4-driver breakaway, but you can see Esterson trying to pull out away up front. We know that Dylan Christie didn't have quite the pace to work with those 2 drivers in the opening circuit. He now runs P2, but Justin Hill going side by side with Dan Clark. If I were Dan Clark, I'd almost let him go and kind of tuck in behind him. Indeed, that's exactly what he does, because you've got the race winner from round 1 in front of you. Let's work with him right now. Let's potentially see where he might have been just a little bit faster than me, and potentially start working his way forward. Hill's now got into 3rd, already starting to close up on Dylan Christie, who is leveraging the draft of Max Esterson as well. In fact, Christie, I believe, the driver to the lead now, moved Dylan Christie to P1. So for the first time, we have a new leader that is not Max Esterson or Justin Hill. Christie leads here to start lap number 3.
Yeah, I think they're also being a little bit patient with one another. You're in the top 4 right now in that lead pack. You don't want to make a mistake and take yourself out of a chance at a win at the end of this thing, because you're not going to win it right now. It needs to be on lap 15 when you're going to make certain moves. So right now you just need to be patient, stay with each other, and work away from the guys behind, as we see that there is almost a 3-second gap back to 5th place. So they're working together, they're getting out front. You don't want to make a mistake.
As we saw there, coming up over kind of the blind hill as you work your way to turn number 5, you see how fast that part of the racetrack is. The drivers coming through turn 5, the final corner of the S's, they've got that thing in a full 4-wheel drift all the way out onto the rumbles on the outside of the racetrack to keep that forward momentum down into turn number 6. There was one driver that was well off the track further back in the field. These 4 drivers have to pull away. Right now, and this, I'll go back to the early days when these guys are young, these young guys and girls, they're racing karts. You'll pull out 4 or 5 guys together. The key is to try to drop the guy at the end. You want to drop that last guy, negative 4-driver battle, negative 3-driver battle, negative 2-driver battle. Right now, we got 3 wide. How about that? 5th, 6th, and 7th, 3 wide. Clark, Vanier, August, and Klubine. It's 4 drivers, so 2 4-driver packs here right now, Brian. We've got the front 4, Hill, Esterson, Christie, and Clark. Then go back 3 seconds to Matt Clark, Zach Vanier, Kyle August, and Connor Klubine. A couple of quartets battling it out here early on.
Yeah, I almost expected the second pack of 4 to work together to try to catch those leaders, because if you're racing really hard back behind, you're going to fall further and further away, and that ruins your chance to win, as we now see it falling to a 4-second gap. So that them racing each other as hard as they are in the front 4, being in a line, they're now falling further back and ruining any chance of actually winning this race.
Quick update on a couple of the drivers that we saw running in the top 10 in the opening race of this doubleheader at Road Atlanta. Both Simon Sykes and Reese Everard out of the race. They'll finish 27th and 26th, respectively. Both those drivers, of course, are showing well. A 5th place finish for Simon Sykes will not be duplicated here in round number 2, as he struggles in the opening lap and has some kind of contact to take himself out. This is going to be with these 4 drivers who are pulling away now. Justin Hill, Max Esterson, Dylan Christie, and Dan Clark. They will fight it out for the race win here, unless, of course, we have some kind of contact. More battling further back, as we said, between Matt Clark and Zachary Vanier and Connor Klubine. All three of those drivers will be racing each other this year in the Ontario F1600 Championship up in Canada, but we may see them come down to run with the FRP boys. The F1600 Championship Series has been a big part of the development of young drivers here for the last 10 years in American open wheel junior formula racing. And as well, not only do they have the F1600 program with FRP, they also have a long-standing F2000 series, a 2-liter category, not the spec car. You can run different cars. There's lots of different chassis that guys run, Van Diemen's, guys are running some Citations. So it's a really great place for guys who love 2-liter racing. And there's a kind of a resurgence going on right now for 2-liter racing, which is really exciting. Of course, the Road to Indy has the USF 2000 Championship, but that is a spec series. This allows drivers to have different chassis, as I said, and a lot of older drivers, more veteran drivers running in that particular program. Just a great part of American open wheel motorsports.
Yeah, racing is huge right now across any different aspect of it, whether we have dirt going on right now, whether it's asphalt, road, oval, anything. It's just to see these young kids coming up through the ranks, it's just always an exciting thing because we always have so much new talent coming into our top series across any type of aspect of racing.
Yeah, it's always fun to follow the stories. And, you know, if those people are watching here on Apex Racing TV, it's one of the things I always say. You should always take the opportunity, especially if you're a racing fan. I don't care if you're a NASCAR fan or an IndyCar fan. In this particular format we're watching right now, open wheel, if you're an NTT IndyCar Series fan, this is the opportunity to find a young driver who you like. Go meet him or her at the racetrack. Become fans of the young driver when they're 15, 16, 17 years of age. By the time they get to IndyCar, you're going to be able to develop this relationship with them. You've been able to follow them all the way through the ranks. I always say, can you imagine if you followed a young Joseph Newgard or a young Graham Rahal or a Marco Andretti or a James Hinchcliffe or a Robert Wickens, whoever it may be? If you followed them when they were younger, the amount of contact that you would have when they finally get to the very top is amazing. And that's just, it's almost like being a baseball fan and getting a chance to really watch a lot of single A and double A ball, right? That's what we're seeing here right now. This is the future stars of the NTT IndyCar Series going out of here. Contact with two drivers through turn number 1. I believe that might have been Clark and Klubine. Clark had made the move to the inside of turn 1. Klubine was on the outside. Left rear to right front contact. Klubine goes off the racetrack once again, but expertly pulls it back on. In fact, I think he held on to the position. Man, crazy racing here. Further back, 5th all the way back to 9th.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure who it was, but someone was all the way off the track, almost hitting that wall.
That might have been Vanier.
Vanier was able to save it and not hit that wall, which he was able to get the car slowed down and pull it back onto the track, not losing too many positions, which was actually very well done. He's actually just sitting back there in 10th, which that could have been much worse for him. He could have been out of this race.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because at that speed going off in turn number 1, especially when you've been shoved off like that, you're trying to do whatever you can to hold on to it, right? And not drive off track and get into the tire wall on the outside. And he did a great job pedaling it, steering it, really precise with the movement to get back on track. Battler for the lead again. They've got a slower car in front of them. Hopefully that driver will get out of the way, because look at this. Hill has worked his way back up, Brian. We wondered whether or not he'd be able to get back to the front of the pack, and indeed he has. Only took him 6 laps. They'll start lap number 7 when they come out of turn number 12, the downhill run here at Road Atlanta. Hill, your leader. Christie runs in 2nd. Esterson 3rd. And the veteran Dan Clark biding his time right now, sitting P4. And again, he didn't get a chance really to see how these guys are driving here at Road Atlanta, because he was back in that battle with Matt Clark. Now he can kind of go to school, watching everybody in front of him. Where is he potentially quicker? You know, are they making any mistakes anywhere? Dan Clark, a veteran driver, looking very strong here, P4.
Yeah, the only one of the front 4 who really had a race kind of like this in race 1 was Dan Clark, with him racing Sykes and Clark. Also, when they were racing back in the pack with 3 of them, the front 2, it was just those 2 trading positions. And then we had Christie kind of running on his own. So the only one with really experience running around with more than just one other car is Dan Clark, to kind of see how these cars react to one another and be able to get that draft and put these cars in the position they need to be to pick up more spots.
I think that they're going to probably time this about as best as they possibly could, coming up to get by one of the slower cars. They'll get a good run down the straightaway here indeed. Justin Hill in the 48 will tuck to the driver's right, and they'll just stream right on by that car who had an issue early. Ideally, just kind of breathe on that throttle a little bit. Let everybody come through. Remember I talked about the front 3 drivers trying to drop that 4th place car? They almost did it, but here comes Christie to the inside. I think they would have been very close had they not battled here to potentially dropping Dan Clark, but that side-by-side run into turn number 2 took away from both of their exits. Each driver having to pedal a little more coming through turn number 10. So that, I think, a gift to Dan Clark, because they could easily have lined up, worked their way through 10 and 11 and left Clark in their dust. Instead, he's back into the draft once again, 4 drivers heading into 1.
Yeah, I think the hunger of wanting to be that lead car and be up front is just too much. They're not able to drop the back car because, as we see, they get in a line, they start to drop that back car, and then they get side by side, and that back car is able to catch right back up. These drivers want to be in that front. They want to have the control of the race, but I actually think the second place car is probably in the best position to pick up that win, as we saw what Hill did on the last lap of the first race.
Yeah, P2 on a track here at Road Atlanta with a car like the Skip Barber machine, of course, low horsepower. It punches a big enough hole that the draft is obviously very crucial. I will say this, Justin Hill, I think of the 4 drivers there, the best through the S's. You watched him come through there, attacks that particular part of the racetrack. He pulled probably 2 or 3 car lengths coming down through the S's to turn number 5. They closed up a bit under the draft into turn number 6. And again, he probably has 2 or 3 car lengths leaving that corner to go under the Mazda bridge. But again, all the way down, it's such a long run here, down from Road Atlanta from turn 7 all the way down to turn 10. Finally, here comes the move again. Dylan Christie, I think he may get this pass done before they get down into the braking zone. Indeed, he does. He'll come right across the bow, middle of the racetrack and through the apex. New leader, Dylan Christie, back to P1.
Yeah, and as we've seen almost every lap, that's about where the passes are made for that lead. We saw it on the first race. That's where the pass was made by Hill. So, and we see it back here with Klubine. We see another pack of 4, the second pack with Clark up front there. This is Rivard up front with Clark running in second there in that group. So these guys are racing just as hard back behind. They are 6 seconds behind the leaders, but they definitely want to pick up as many spots as they can. And they're kind of in that same situation the front ones are, where they want to drop that back guy, but they just keep racing hard, as we see the back 2 getting side by side there.
Hold your breath a little bit. That's Klubine and August, Kyle August, side by side going into the S's. It's not really a 2x2 kind of segment of the racetrack here. Looks to be like Matt Clark, absolutely masterfully using that lap car to be able to get away from Rivard, I think. Indeed. Let's see what kind of a run he gets down. He still may get eaten up by the draft a little bit here, but at this point here, if he's able to duck down, no, the lap car is doing a great job letting everybody come through. Clark has the spot. Rivard slotting into second. Klubine third in that order. That's 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th with Kyle August. Clark trying to see if he can't drop these guys, Brian, but it's so hard to do here.
Yeah, I think another big thing is we see these lapped cars pulling out of the way and letting the lead lapped cars by. There are so many times that you'll see a lapped car stay in the way, and it just causes someone to have an issue to get stuck behind them, especially if you're going into a braking zone. That can cause such a hard issue for one of these lead lap cars.
Connor Klubine with a better run. Clark came across the inside of the track to try to hold the position. Kyle August in the inside up over the curbing as well. Clark's going to lose a bunch of spots here on the outside. Kind of hung out to dry a little bit. In fact, he'll go from the front of that group to the back. So 5th back to 8th. And that's as easy as it can happen here at Road Atlanta. You get your car in the wrong spot. And I had said this, Brian, at the top of the broadcast, that car placement is so crucial here. Number 1, getting the car to go into the S's. If you're too late on the turn-in, you're constantly catching up on the apexes. They're always further down the racetrack, and you're trying to get the car pointed back down. Similarly, when you're coming down that straightaway, you're trying to figure out what to do. Matt Clark coming to the inside of the track, potentially the defensive line. Everybody else stayed to the outside. Really, he just got pinched. He was not able to get through turn 10A, the first left-hander, with really enough forward bite coming out of the corner. Couldn't hold the momentum, so he was kind of late getting back over to turn number 10B, and that meant the drivers were able to roll by him on the inside. Just got away from the race line. Now he's got to press the reset button and go to work on the guys in front of him. This is, of course, the battle for the final position within the top 5.
Yeah, and they want this top 5, as you see them all fighting for it. They are 2x2 right now, and they are not giving any, as we see Card put his tires out into the grass again. Like I said, these cars are not afraid to put these things anywhere they need to go. If they have to put the tires out in that grass, they are not afraid to do it.
I want to say this right now. We are 10 laps into a 15 lap or 5 laps to go. We're going to potentially go 4 wide down the back straightaway. These drivers are doing a tremendous job, and this is what you expect to see out of guys that run in the F1600 program, Skip Arbor, whatever it may be. 3 wide now down into turn number 10 to the inside. Book it. Matt Clark goes to P5. I like that pass to the inside. Remember, last time out of turn number 10 for Brian, he was in the tail of the group. Now he leads the group coming down through turn number 12. That was a good lap for Matt Clark. Just took his time, settled in. Good move to the inside. He goes back to P5. I just want to say, these guys are doing a tremendous job. We're not a little bit of contact here and there, but this is beautiful racing. This is what F1600 is all about. It's been like this since 1967 when they first came out with Formula Ford racing, and it's tremendous to see how these drivers are respecting each other going side by side.
Yeah, the amount of respect given, along with the ability to keep these cars clean, and even if they touch a little bit, to then pull away, reset, and not wreck one another. It's amazing racing that's happening right now.
I was going to say, let's have a look at that lead again. It's almost like a carbon copy. We have the 4 drivers locked together here. Dan Clark, though, still sitting back in that P4 position. I wonder if that's a strategy move, that he's just kind of playing what's going on so far. Does not want to get involved in a potential incident. He's dropped back enough right now. He does not want to lose this draft in total. Max Esserson, still the leader. He's in that number 80 machine. Justin Hill, the winner of round number 1. He's now going back to the lead as they're side by side. So move Hill back to the lead. Esterson in the second. Christie in third. Dan Clark, though, falling back a little bit. Almost a full half second behind. They'll try to get a good run through turn number 10. He does. Don't count out Dan Clark yet. 11 laps in. We'll start lap number 12 when they come across start-finish.
Yeah, I think they're just going to continue to pass each other. That will definitely not be the last pass that we see.
No.
I still think you want to be in the second position when we come to the final lap. I think that's going to give you the best spot to be able to take that lead away. If you are fourth, you're most likely not going to be able to get that run needed to jump all the way up to first. So it's really going to come down to putting yourself in the right position with the laps leading up to the final lap.
Dan Clark representing Brad Hayes Racing here this weekend, this evening here at Road Atlanta. Brad Hayes Racing, one of the drivers in the teams in the Pacific F1600 series. They utilize the American-made Piper chassis, which has had much success over the last number of years. A former SCCA National Championship runoffs winner in the Formula F category, Formula Ford, now called Formula F. Of course, Honda playing a big role in the F1600 racing these days. And a lot of drivers still using that Ford Kent motor, but a lot of them as well have made the transition into the Honda. Dylan Christie, let's have him here in that number 82 machine, currently P3. That's a little further back in this group. They're lining back up again. And as Brian told you, this thing's going to come to the end. Lots more action still to come. On board with Dylan Christie. Let's follow Dylan here for a little bit. I like this. Let's have a look what it's like online. Let's have a look as they go down to turn 10.
You see him looking to the inside here, going into this braking zone. He's probably going to tuck back in line, though, just set himself up in that racing line as we see them sliding these cars around, but sticking right to the bumpers of each other's cars. They are nose to tail still, and even if they pull away a little bit, that draft just pulls them right on back.
Let's stay on board right now here, Brian, with Dylan Christie. And in fact, you know what? Let's you and I back off a bit. I want to hear him rolling through the S's. Let's just back off, and we'll take a half a lap here with Dylan Christie. Dylan, wow, what a great run for him. Brian, that's a handful of race car, up and over the curb everywhere you go. These guys are really working it hard, but that was a lot of fun to see what Dylan had in terms of a race car, the racing line through those S's. You watch them working here, opposite lock on the cars. They're working the front wheels as well, just trying to get the thing to keep up on those revs, as I said. What a tremendous sight line here from Dylan Christie.
Yeah, you can hear the tires screaming as they are putting these things on the edge, and it's such an amazing sound to hear. iRacing does a great job with that, but to hear those tires screaming just shows you how hard they are pushing these cars to make sure that they can stick together and try to win this race.
It's a thing about the lower horsepower open wheel formula cars. You know, even though they have the slicks, or they have the wings on these Skip Barber cars, a very minimal amount of downforce with the wings that they have on these particular cars. Quick little look at here at the battle for P5. Again, Zach Rivard, Matt Clark, Connor Klubine, and Kyle August all in the middle of the battle. They'll work their way out of turn number 10, 11. Little wide run there for Clark. Matt Clark not getting a good turn down into the apex of 10B. That's going to let both Klubine and August come through. Again, now coming across to work lap number 14. 2 more laps remaining here for round 2 of the FRP iRacing Challenge here at Brazelton, Georgia. Once again, myself, Rob Howden, joined by Brian Delp, Dennis Branch on the cams. Look at the jump there for Rivard. Zach Rivard able to kind of pull away a little bit here. Klubine will throw it into turn number 2. These guys are all up and over the curb as well, kind of shaking things up for the final run here for that 5th position. This is 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th coming down through the S's. Klubine getting chased aggressively here by Kyle August.
Yeah, I think Rivard wants to see the 2 behind him get side by side and racing it out so that he can jump out to more of a lead as we see him start to gap at them a little bit. I think he definitely wants to have that gap so that he doesn't have to worry about someone drafting up and passing him on that final lap.
I'll tell you, the racecraft being shown here so far, the respect, Klubine given just enough room for Rivard, who threw it down the inside. That he could have slammed the door shut there for sure. Both drivers would have been off track, but he gave just enough room for Rivard to come to the inside. And look what's going to happen. He's going to get paid off with that. He makes the move to the inside. In fact, his teammate at Britain West Motorsports, Matt Clark, going to make it 3 wide down the back straightaway. Clark on the inside. Rivard's out front. That's August on the middle. That's Klubine on the outside. They'll work 3 wide down to turn number 10. Who's going to come out the other side with this one? Oh, a little bit of contact between Klubine. The outside run comes Clark. He'll get a better run up the hill. Matt Clark's going to hold the spot. Little contact at the apex. Final lap, though, underway as the leaders have already come through. Here's the drivers running 6th, 7th, and 8th. Zach Rivard's been able to pull away to P5 with this battle behind. But it's time to go to the leaders as they'll work their way now down into the S's. Brian, this is the final lap here for round number 2.
Yeah, and I think Christie is sitting in a great position right now as long as he doesn't let Esterson pass him in any spots. As long as he can get that draft up to hill, especially on that straightaway, to be able to make that pass, I think he's sitting in the best position out of all 4 of these cars.
Well, they've been testing it over the last 15 laps. How far back can you be to get that good run on the straightaway? You know, will Justin Hill maybe stack him up a little bit coming into turn number 7, so everybody has to check up a little bit? Very similar to 5A and 5B, Moss Corner at the Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, where you kind of stack them up there a little bit before you come down the Andretti straightaway. And here they come again. Look at the gap he's got now. Is it enough? I don't know. Esterson's going to try to work here with Christie. I don't think so. These cars put such a big hole in the air. It's still Hill with the lead. They'll work their way down the straightaway. Final time to see who's going to win race number 2. Christie goes to the inside of the racetrack. Here comes Esterson. He's thinking 3 wide. Christie has the lead, though, down. He won the opening round of race number 1, finished 3rd in the championship, running for Team Pelfrey. He'll work his way up top of the hill, side by side coming out. Dylan Christie. We're going to have 2 different winners here at Road Atlanta. Can he get through turn number 12? Hits the apex nicely. Good forward bite. Dylan Christie winning in race number 2. Max Esterson, back-to-back second place finishes. Justin Hill, a couple of podiums. Championship battle is going to be very tight here. Dan Clark holding on to 4th. Never was really able to make any kind of a challenge whatsoever. Just stayed P4 the entire time. Kind of surprised he wasn't able to get himself into the fight. Zach Rivard able to pull out from that fight behind him. He goes to P5. Matt Clark ends up in the 6th spot. 7th was Connor Klubine. A couple of top 10s for Connor. Colin Mullen. Man, he started way back. Yeah, 14 position improvement for Colin Mullen. Started 22nd, worked his way up into 8th. Nice job for the race prep driver. Chris Wright ends up in 9th, and Megan Gilks rounding out the top 10. Good run for Megan as well. Again, big guys moving forward. Colin Mullen up 14. Jean-Christophe Trahan coming up 12 spots. He ended up 11th after starting in the 23rd spot. So, Brian, I'm telling you, we were treated to some really, really good racing there. Again, the FRP program, very much about their F1600 series, their F2000 series. These cars, of course, very similar to the F1600s that run in the Formula Race Promotions platform. And I just thought those drivers put on such a tremendous show. 4 drivers battling wheel to wheel, a little bit of contact here and there, but primarily hardcore, real, wheel-to-wheel, open-wheel racing.
Yeah, the ability to go side by side, sometimes 3 wide, almost 4 wide at some points, to be able to put it side by side like that, not touch, and be able to get through these corners safely was just an amazing show, and it just gives credit to all of the drivers as they were able to do so. We saw some contact, some drivers ended their night early, but for the ones that were able to make it last, the show that they put on was absolutely amazing, and the finishes they got. We saw Christie do the exact same thing to Hill that Hill did to Esterson in the first race, and that was a thing of beauty.
Yeah, that's it. The interesting, the cream kind of rose to the top once again. The drivers that we saw do so well in that opening championship battle that they had, the first series of the FRP iRacing Challenge. Max Esterson won the championship. He's going to be right in the fight as well. Of course, a couple of second place finishes for him. Dylan Christie finished third in the opening championship. He gets a third place in round one and a win in round number two. Dan Clark was fourth in the championship. He ends up with a fifth and a fourth. So guys up front, the same guys we saw before, kind of in the fight as well. But now we throw Matt Clark's name in there as well. I think we throw Connor Klubine's name in there. We throw guys like Kyle August in there as well. There's a bunch of guys that could go after the championship when we get back racing again next Thursday. Otherwise, Brian, bottom line was some pretty good racing. I'm not sure whether or not we're going to get any of our drivers to come up into the interview booth. We'll find out in a couple seconds. But before that, give me your thoughts on your first time in the commentary booth here on iRacing. Excellent job, and you definitely got some great racing.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and the race that these guys put on made it absolutely amazing to see these cars running the way they did. At times, you saw them drafting like you would see in the stock car world, which is the world I come from more of. To see them pushing each other all the way past other people. You saw teammates working together. It was just an absolutely unbelievable show that these guys put on, and two amazing races.
Yeah, I really like the Skip Barber car in terms of the fact that the lower horsepower, you know you're going to have draft packs. It's just about the drivers being able to respect each other. And I think that's my biggest takeaway here. Not so, obviously the drivers we saw that were worked their way up front. Esterson, very, very quick. Dylan Christie, these guys that we know are able to run up front with Kevin as well. Or rather, Justin Hill getting his victory. These are the guys we're going to see racing up front to battle out for the championship. But just the racing was so good. The side-by-side action, exactly what we were looking for. A great stop here to start this second program, the FRP iRacing Challenge 2, as they call it, brought to you by Formula Race Promotions and Hoosier Racing Tire. If you do want to learn more about the program, it's www.racefrp.com. As I said, a number of different series, F1600 Championship, F2000 as well, the Atlantic Championship, and they do a prototype championship as well. So they do a lot of stuff in terms of, I want to say, pro-amateur level racing. And it's there's a lot of people that like to do that competition. Great race cars for sure. And again, through their F1600 program, Brian, they're developing a lot of great young drivers.
Yeah, and that's what we talked about before, is to see these kids become the stars that they are. You talked about some of the names like Joseph Newgarden, Wickens, and all those people. It's just such an amazing thing. And you go out there, you meet these kids, and then when you become these big stars, you then have that relationship already. And it's just such an amazing thing to see these kids be entered into this racing world. We saw in the stock car world Chase Elliott come up through the ranks, and the ability of people to know who he was because of his father. But there's more kids than just that we see come through the ranks in every discipline of racing. And so it's such an amazing thing to see all this talent on display.
Indeed, Brian, thank you so much. Great to have you on board here for your first iRacing call here on the Apex Racing TV network. Again, did a fantastic job. Folks, so we're underway for the second championship of this particular program. Unsure yet where we're going next Thursday. We'll find out. Make sure you follow Apex Racing on social media. Follow the Formula Race Promotions team as well on social media as well. Again, at racefrp.com. Follow them on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram as well to be able to see what's up for the next event. We'll let you know. Otherwise, we cap things off with a tremendous race to start things off. Dylan Christie, of course, getting the victory in race number 2. Max Esterson in second and Justin Hill in third. Hill was the driver who was able to win out in round number 1. Esterson second and Christie in third. So the same drivers on the podium, just jostle them around a little bit. We look forward to seeing who's able to rise to the forefront when we head to the next event next Thursday for rounds number 3 and rounds number 4. Of course, it'll be live here on Apex Racing TV. On behalf of Brian Delp and Dennis Branch, my name's Rob Howden. Bye for now.